Hello and welcome back to the Bird's Eye View podcast. We are here on Wednesday, November 26th, and Dylan Cease is reportedly a Toronto Blue Jay. I'm your host, Zach Worden, joined as always by Jori Negin-Shecter, and we're here tonight to react to this huge signing, the largest free agent contract the Toronto Blue Jays have given out, and it is to a starting pitcher who will slot nicely atop their rotation. Jori, how are you feeling about Dylan Cease, the Blue Jay?
Yeah, I mean, the news breaks, and the first reaction was a classic Mike Breen adjacent. Bang! That's a big win for these Blue Jays. They add a top of the rotation arm that maybe they didn't desperately need after the Shane Bieber opt in, but is certainly not, something that they're gonna say no to. And all of a sudden, this might just be the best rotation in the American League. Might just be one of the top three rotations in all of baseball. And you have suddenly added one of the league's premier strikeout guys. You add to a rotation that already looks very deep, very experienced. And of course, you've got you Savage in there as well for an upside play. Like this just fits them beautifully. We had said going into the offseason, even though the obvious kind of spot maybe was looking for another shortstop to replace Bo Bichette. The rotation was somewhere they really were kind of quietly somewhere they should really be looking to address. And they've gone out and done exactly that. They've added Dylan Cease, led the league in strikeouts per nine last year, finished sixth overall in strikeouts, also only in about 165 odd innings compared to most of his compatriots in the 180 range. This is a bat missing dude like few guys in Major League Baseball, and something that the Blue Jays rotation didn't necessarily have in spades at time last year. So I think for all things kind of considered, a really enormous add to this Blue Jays rotation and really signifying more than anything else, the chips are in on this team.
Yeah, I mean, I think, we go back to our offseason preview and we were both kind of like Dylan Cease is the best free agent starter available right now. And, with the lockout looming, with next year's free agent starter class being kind of in between, with Kevin Gausman and Shane Bieber set to hit free agency next year, Jose Barrios too if he chooses to opt out, but I doubt at this point that that's going to happen. And so you slot in this 30-year-old starter at the top of your rotation. I think with we can kind of get into to him as a player more as we go on, but one thing that we talked about is like just how durable this guy is, right? Like I think he's never gone on the injured list in his career. And the Blue Jays rotation next year, for as much as they went into 2025 having a ton of innings banked between Barrios and Gausman and Bassett and Bowden Francis and Max Scherzer, I guess, things play out how they do. But, next year, I think that those innings weren't a certainty at all. Kevin Gausman coming off a season where he threw 123 innings, I think it was when you include the postseason, 223 innings, including the postseason, right? Like that's the most he's thrown in his career. Trey Savage, obviously the most he's thrown in his career when you account for, just the huge jump that he had between all the levels and pitching in the postseason. Shane Bieber's still working his way back into form from Tommy John, so there's no, I would be pretty shocked if Shane Bieber threw 200 innings next year, and Jose Barrios obviously ends the year on the injured list and you don't really know what you're going to get for him. So getting some inning certainty, I think, was absolutely massive for this rotation. And when you can kind of get that inning certainty with the talent and the stuff that Dylan Cease has, I think you can only imagine this deal as a win for the Blue Jays to kind of have this guy that you can slot in for 2026 and then have him there in the years beyond when you're trying to fill in the spots for the Gosmans and the Biebers if they do end up leaving.
This signing to me is in a lot of ways kind of the same playbook as the original Gosman
Yeah.
signing back in 2022. This was a guy that really brought some electric stuff to the table and was, maybe a couple years older than Dylan Cease is right now, turns 30 before the end of the year, just after Christmas. But, to me, this is a guy that is going to immediately, I think, slot in as your number one. And if you want to, give deference to Kevin Gausman because he's been Kevin Gausman for you for so long, sure, you can call him a number two, but that's a legit number two. And I
Not
mean,
a Sonny Gray number two.
no, I'd say definitely not a Sonny Gray number two. And in a lot of cases, a guy you can comfortably call a number one starter, an opening day starter, an ace. This is a huge ad for the Blue Jays. I mean, you want to talk a couple of years ago, you know, Alek Manoah gets Cy Young votes. You know who finished ahead of him that year? One of those guys was Dylan Cease.
Yeah.
This is a guy with tons of pedigree, with tons of durability. There's concerns in terms of maybe, command, but you look at a guy like a Blake Snell and you see just how that stuff plays up in the postseason. Doesn't matter if he's not going to be throwing 7 innings every night because when you get to the big games, he misses bats like so few guys across Major League Baseball, which is just going to be such an enormous part of the equation for the Blue Jays in 2026 and beyond. This is a huge ad. This is a great pitcher, and this is a significant statement for these Blue Jays.
Yeah, I mean, he's a year removed from being he finished fourth in Cy Young voting in the National League a year ago. And, I think when you kind of look at the season that he had, obviously, there's a lot of talk about the ERA and all that stuff. And, I think you can kind of go online and see the talk about how the Padres defense was he was one of the pitchers who had the defense behind, or the defense behind Dylan Cease was among the worst of any pitcher in baseball last year. So obviously, it's a 4.55 ERA last year, but you look at the xERA, it's 3.46. The FIP is 3.56. The Sierra is 3.58, and those are better indicators of future ERA, right? And the Stuff Plus is right where you want it to be for a starter. Obviously, you mentioned that it's kind of similar to the Gausman thing in the way that he's a two-pitch guy, right? Like he's a slider fastball. And I wouldn't be surprised as he ages if they kind of find a way for him to incorporate some of these other pitches that he has, thrown on occasion throughout his career. But for him to come in, I think right away, like it's you say it, it's the swing and miss stuff. He struck out 29.8% of the hitters that he faced last year. I think, since he became a full-time starter, he leads the league in starts. He leads the league in strikeouts. He also leads the league in walks. But, I think the Snell thing is actually a pretty apt comparison, right? Because, on one hand, a similar comparison in the way that the Dodgers kind of jumped the market last year to get Snell, and the Blue Jays are kind of doing that here, right? Like it's November 26th. I was saying earlier, I'm like, I don't really remember the Blue Jays kind of being so active to go out and kind of get their guy so early. And on the other hand, Cease kind of does the same thing. Like you mentioned, maybe a little bit wild, but the strikeouts kind of help cover up for that, right? And I think Snell, obviously, that's a two-time Cy Young winner, so the ceiling there is a little bit higher. I think maybe with the contact management and some of the home run issues that Cease maybe faced last year. But I think overall, like, this is a huge swing for the Blue Jays, and it does give them kind of that top end of the rotation certainty that we had talked about them needing in this offseason.
I'm about to say something, and you're going to flame me for it, but I'm going to say it anyways.
Okay.
This 7-year deal is like there's a pretty non-zero chance that Dylan Cease turns into a level of excellence guy with these Blue Jays.
Wow. I won't flame you for it because, I think they're positioned pretty well next year. And let's say, he emerges as kind of your number one during a postseason run. And I've seen a lot of tweets about his playoff ERA being 8.74 or whatever. But if you're talking to me about an 11 inning sample size, I do not want to hear it. I do not want to hear it at all. So I don't hate it, honestly. Like, could you see Kevin Gausman being a level of excellence guy if he has like a really great year here for the Jays?
I think next year, 100% it could happen.
Yeah.
I think that there's a number of guys you think of this group, obviously you've got Jose Bautista from the last era. You figure Edwin Encarnacion probably will eventually get his opportunity put in the level of excellence as well. It feels like we're seeing a new era of kind of Blue Jays uh,
Yeah.
institutions or whatever you want to call it. And by adding Dylan Cease to this core, because that's what they're doing,
Yeah.
they're creating a new core kind of on the fly here, and Dylan Cease is a key cog in that. It suddenly becomes extremely enviable for a lot of other teams, the group you've built and the potential that this group is going to have the chance to fulfill.
Yeah. So, I mean, a little bit more, I say, you mentioned like the rotation didn't quite have this type of swing and miss. It also didn't have this type of velocity, right? Like this is a fastball that averages 97.1. And, it's going to be pretty nice to see somebody throwing that hard. And I think kind of when you look at the deal, it's really interesting. Obviously there's the 7 years part of it where, 7 years probably a little bit long for any pitcher, really, especially one who doesn't have the track record of being like a Cy Young type. But I mean, at the same time, he's had a couple of like high Cy Young finishes. But, I think I saw when Max Scherzer signed with the Nationals in, I can't even remember when 2016, 2017, around there, and he signed for 7 to 10. Um, I mean, that Max Scherzer is getting a totally different level of contract than Dylan Cease is. But, I think you look at a guy, Max Scherzer was also 30 when that deal happened. And, obviously the pedigree was a little bit different for him going into that deal. But, I think Cease has shown over the last 5 seasons like that he is this elite strikeout artist who is going to, if nothing else, give you 30 starts and rack up a ton of strikeouts, which helps you get through innings. And with the Blue Jays defense behind him, I can only imagine that there is going to be some positive regression coming his way, and that, like at worst next year, you're looking at a guy who racks up the innings. Like I would say, you can probably lock him in for 180 innings if he's healthy, and a sub 40 ERA.
Like again, chance that this guy could end up in a Cy Young conversation. Could certainly get votes with this defense behind him. If we're talking, if Bo Bichette is not his shortstop next year, and we'll see how this affects things. Maybe we can get into that a little bit here, just in terms of what this could mean for outlook, finance wise.
Yeah, so I mean, with that, like we haven't even mentioned that there's deferrals involved in this contract, right? And I believe the Athletics' Mitch Bannon reported that the deferrals
Friend of
bring
the
it
program,
down.
Mitch Bannon.
Yes, he reported that the deal is down to about 26 million per season, and so that's huge for the Blue Jays. I mean, it's only like 4 million per year, right? Because there's a 30 million AAV, but at the end of the day, like that helps you fit more people under your tax, right? So we'll kind of see how it goes forward, and what they kind of do. But obviously, like the Bieber thing, I think was really big here, right? Where he kind of locks himself in for that $16 million mark, allows you to probably be so aggressive on a Dylan Cease and kind of put that money in your rotation. And now I think, it kind of allows you to focus on that bat and kind of getting that high level hitter that you don't have because Bo Bichette is currently a free agent. And whether that's Bichette or it's Kyle Tucker,
Well,
I would imagine that's kind of the next step is where they are going to look.
do you think this takes them out of the Tucker sweepstakes?
I know there'd been some talk about like Bo and Tucker. I would imagine this kind of takes you out of both of them. But again, like I don't know. I don't have, kind of the inside books on what they're willing to spend and what they're willing to how high they're willing to go with their payroll and whatnot. Like I can't really say whether I think it definitively takes them out of the Kyle Tucker sweepstakes. I think if Kyle Tucker is willing to accept a $400 million contract from the Blue Jays, then they would give it to him.
I think you're right. I think that this by no means takes them out of it. And I wonder if it's kind of almost like helps their case, you just added one guy.
Yeah.
You think of what the Dodgers have done the last couple of years and how they've gone to free agents and been like, hey, look at this super team we're building. All of a sudden, Dylan Cease, Vladdy Guerrero. Well, I mean, Vladdy commits, Cease then commits, Bieber commits in there as well. You're accumulating all these guys. All of a sudden, it's kind of like, oh, everyone wants to be part of this thing. Maybe I want to be part of this too.
I think a $210 million payday helps wanting to play somewhere. One thing I did want to point out, so I was listening to the most recent episode of Rates and Barrels from The Athletic, and Eno Saris was breaking down some of the top pitcher contracts, $130 million and more. And I think it was like since 2013 or something like that. and he kind of broke them down into like what the good deals were and what the bad deals were. And the good deals are like the Max Scherzer contract with the Nationals, Clayton Kershaw with the Dodgers, Verlander, his big contract that he signed, Zach Greinke, Garrett Cole, Felix Hernandez, like all these types of guys who were kind of fell into the bucket of guys who produce 15 or more WAR. And then, on the other side of that, there's Steven Strasburg, Jose Barrios does kind of fall into that group right now. The deal that Max Scherzer signed with the Mets, incredible that he's on this list twice. Patrick Corbin, David Price, like those types, right? And I think one thing that he pointed out that was really interesting is like just how the group of the best deals, the best five of them in the 3 years leading up to their contracts, those pitchers averaged 659 innings pitched between or in the 3 years leading up, obviously 25% K rate, 6% walk rate, and 17 and a half WAR in the 3 seasons before. And then the big difference was in the worst five of those contracts, they averaged 491 innings pitched. So he was saying that the innings pitched is actually like a good predictor of how these deals will age. And obviously Cease, he's not quite at 659 innings because a little bit of a different era that we're playing in right now. And of course, his start number maybe doesn't always correlate with his innings pitched because
He's
of
a little bit
some
prone
short short short
to
some
those
shorter outings.
lengthy innings, it seems.
But he still was, 534 innings pitched. So I think if you're concerned about the deal aging poorly, like I think that there's a good chance that this is going to be a guy who is able to, you know, he's shown that durability. So I think there's going to be a good chance that he's going to be able to, you know, pitch well for a majority of this deal.
Yeah, I think that's definitely going to be something to keep an eye on for sure. I mean, every pitcher, every pitcher is durable until they break. Like that's just kind of the nature of the beast.
Yes.
But the way that he has stayed healthy, I mean, the signs are there, the platform is there that you're moving forward with a guy that has been able to stay healthy to this point. Will he stay healthy in the future? That's just something that remains to be seen. But on the whole, it's a bet on a guy with the right kind of peripherals. It's a bet on
Yeah.
the guy with the right bill of health, and it's a bet on a guy with the right type of pedigree.
He probably won't stay healthy for all 7 years. If I had to make a guess, it's that there will be an IL stint eventually in these seven
I mean,
years.
Jose
But
Barrios damn near made it 5 seasons without an IL stint.
yeah,
So
so I mean, maybe you're looking at that IL stint when he's 35 instead of when he's 31.
he's 35 and has somehow lost the ability to strike guys out, and his slurve or slider or whatever it is, he becomes Jose Barrios.
Uh, there's interesting difference between those two pitchers for sure. I guess kind of with it, I mean, we kind of talk about like all the upside of the deal, right? Like I think the durability, the strikeouts, all this. But is there any part of this that scares you a little bit? Like, does the ERA scare you at all from last year? I know we're not really looking at that as an evaluation tool for predicting what it's going to be going forward, but like, is there anything about this deal that scares you about what it
I
could
don't
be in the long term or short term?
I don't know if there's anything that maybe like scares me. Here's something that I do think is worth acknowledging. By the way, just gonna toss this out there. My I just Googled Dylan Cease to pull up his baseball reference page, and I got a note that it's a site that I visit often. So it
The
certainly
Dylan
won't be
Cease page
changing.
specifically or Baseball
The
Reference?
Dylan Cease page
Huh.
specifically. Um, he's for his career, he's got a 1.1 home run per nine rate. The Blue Jays, as you're well aware, especially if you listen to this podcast, the home run uh, for the pitching and the starters, maybe in particular, can and has been an issue. Um, they haven't targeted guys necessarily that when they miss their spot, the ball gets pounded into the ground. The way that like a Fromber or even like a Ranger Suarez, right? And those
Yeah.
are two other guys that could have gone for in the free agency pool. I don't know if it's necessarily something that frightens me. Well documented that home run to fly ball rate is something that is basically out of a pitcher's control. But I do think that it's kind of worth just maybe just tossing a little red star next to it that they've kind of chosen once again to forego home run suppression. Now, they've done that at the cost and at the premium of a guy that, as we've said, strikes out everyone and their grandmother. But it's still interesting to me that there seems to be a very clear directive from this front office that home runs are a necessary evil.
I wonder if they're just, they're kind of like, home runs are going to be what they are. And, it'll either be like you mentioned, a home run fly ball rate that is kind of random and, you'll get like a Jeff Hoffman type season or, you'll get Dylan Cease in one of his better years. And it's kind of funny when you look at like the way that he's like alternated good and bad seasons where it's, 2022 Cy Young finalist, 2023 ERA's creeping up over 4.5, and then 2024 Cy Young fourth finish, and then last year ERA is back over 4.5 again. And is that just kind of the variance in the home run to fly ball ratio? I mean, when you look at it, the 2 years where he's a Cy Young vote receiver, it's a home run to fly ball rate under 10%, and when he's given up, when the ERA is creeping up there, it's a home run to fly ball rate that's over 10%. So.
I mean, doesn't get as clear cut or any more clear cut than that, I think.
Yeah, it's gonna be fun to watch. I think what did you I mean, we talked about this before on the offseason preview, but just kind of, you brought it up, like the Framber slash Ranger Suarez group, it kind of seemed like the Blue Jays were destined to kind of shop in that department, if you will, and whether that's Tatsuya Mai as well. What do you kind of make of them prioritizing Cease out of that foursome or even, five if you want to toss like Michael King in there?
I think it's definitely interesting that they did shop at the very top. I think you could have got away with any of those really four or five guys, or six if you want to include King or Imai or Suarez, Framber, all like everybody there. Um, I'm interested that they chose to shop at the top end. I appreciate that they did. I think that it's good to go out and get the best players. It's not a hot take, but it's peculiar that they felt it was worth the premium to get the name brand as opposed to kind of going, oh, Michael King's got all these kind of projectable attributes, but it hasn't translated this year. Maybe we can turn that into something for next year. Who knows? I mean, everyone's filling in Jose Barrios in the rotation next year. Is that a foregone conclusion for this team? I mean, you've committed so much money to him that you almost kind of figure, but I don't think that that's a guarantee by any means. You're gonna need rotation depth, and if the Blue Jays view Jose Barrios as rotation depth at this point, um, then what's to stop them from going out and adding another starter, right? We've heard all about how they're really interested in Tatsuya Mai. Uh, we've heard, other guys like, they're interested in, and not necessarily on the starting front, but Munetaka Murakami, and we've heard about the Tucker stuff, right? Like we've heard that the Jays are willing to spend,
if
which
they're a free agent or in a trade rumor, it's the Blue Jays have probably been connected to them.
they sound like they're knocking on doors, which to me, if it would take a couple things falling through, but it would indicate to me that there's an amenability, there's an openness to going out and spending, even if you've kind of earmarked some cash for a guy like Jose Barrios, because you've got enough disposable flexibility that you can eat that money and have him be like a low leverage reliever or something if you really need that to be the case. Would he be happy with that? I doubt it. How would that go? Would you have to cut bait? I'm sure they don't want to eat 60 odd million, and it starts to become a different conversation. But it's just, you know, right now there seems like there's a lot of opportunity, and the fact that they've gone out and jumped the market and spent like this, would seem to tell me that they feel confident in their ability to go out and get guys, even if they're not getting the best deal. You look at the Dodgers; they went out and got guys, even if it wasn't the best deal, because they're the Dodgers and that's what they do. They go out and they spend, 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 and they add stars.
What's the Andrew Freeman quote? If you're reasonable on every free agent, you're gonna finish second on every free agent, right?
Exactly that. And they went out and they got their guy.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's pretty cool that they did. I think, we talked about Cease as, I'm 2 for 2 on the last two off-season previews on predicting who the Jays are going to sign. But I actually did want to kind of follow up on your point about the fifth starter. Obviously, the way that it lines up right now, it's I think it's pretty easy to say Cease, Gosman, Savage, Bieber, Barrios. And then you have Eric Lauer and Bowden Francis kind of providing some depth. And then, the guys beyond that, like Adam Macko, Ricky Tiedemann will be back eventually, maybe pushing up for a spot there. Gage Stanifer, if things continue to go right for him, could probably be an early riser to AAA and, maybe pitch his way into the conversation. I mean, if you were to handicap it here today on Wednesday, November 26th, do you, would you expect Jose Barrios to be the fifth starter in that rotation?
I think I'm comfortable with that. I think if we're talking about him as the three or the four, I think that's when things get a little dicey. And realistically, that's where they were last winter. He was coming in as the three or the four.
I mean, he was the opening day starter last year.
I mean, exactly that. Obviously, the Gosman situation
Yes.
notwithstanding, and this, that, and the other. But I think to me, they're first of all, they're so much better positioned right now than they were at the beginning of last year. But you're comfortable with the potential upside of Barrios as your fifth starter. And also, I think that they do have enough options kind of knocking on the door. You just rhymed off all these kids that it's not, you know, implausible that they could kind of say, hey, let's go try to get Kyle Tucker. Like, as I was just saying. Or they could be like, oh, we don't love Barrios as a guy. We'd like to see if we could maybe, I don't know, if they could move that contract, if they'd have to attach some guys. But I just think that, they even though they just committed $30 million, 26 million technically, the door still feels wide open for this team.
Yeah, I think too. I mean, just reading Shai Davidi's piece at Sportsnet right now, he's talking about um, that the bullpen seems to be kind of maybe the next step if and of course he says remain in pursuit of Bo Bichette and consider Kyle Tucker. So I wonder if they are kind of feeling good about it. I would imagine too that of course as we sit here on the outside looking in, I think it's easy to maybe not have the most confidence in a Bowden Francis type. But at the same time, it's a guy who you've seen kind of at his peak be a guy who's like throwing no hitters every start, right? So, I wonder where they're at with him. I wonder where they're at with Eric Lauer. I think those are two guys who have, shown us over the last couple seasons that they are certainly more than capable of holding down like a fifth starter spot, if not, pitching a little bit more effectively than that. So I would imagine, with that kind of fifth spot up for grabs um, that it may not be up for grabs if with I don't think that they're going to maybe go out and add somebody of significance with kind of the group that they have. I think mentioning earlier kind of the inning concerns with you Savage and Bieber and maybe Gosman a little bit like maybe that pushes them to go somebody like maybe you go Amai and then you want to go six-man rotation with that, but then that kind of limits how much you get to see Dylan Cease pitch, right? So
I'm going to pivot here a tiny bit, but
yeah.
still related. Dodgers 1, Mariners 2, Blue Jays 3.
Yeah, I'd have to like I would like to see them all laid out, but I would imagine like as I sit here thinking about it, like that's probably the correct group. I mean, the Yankees when they get Cole back will be fairly intriguing, especially if Schlittler kind of continues to pitch his way into it. If the Red
Very, very
Sox
clean pronunciation there. Kudos
Thank
to you
you.
on that one.
Thanks. Appreciate that. The Red Sox, if they go out and add a number two starter, I
A
know
real number two.
I'm a Sonny Gray believer, so I think Sonny Gray is one of the best 60 pitchers in baseball. But if the Red Sox go out and push him to be their number three, then that's another really strong rotation. But I still don't know if I would put it over the Jays just because of the depth, right? And like Cease isn't crochet Scooble Yamamoto type, right? Got to put him in there now, I guess. But it's a guy who I could certainly see being like a really really good playoff starter.
I think he's a top 30 starter for sure.
Yeah, yeah. No, I like top 15, maybe somewhere around there, which is, you know, there's
Take that every
only
day of the week.
there's only so many Paul Skeens out there, right? So it'll be fun. I don't really have much else to say about the trade. I think the trade, the signing, it's you can tell it's middle of November. I was not anticipating the Dylan Cease signing to come down right now.
It's it's a fun time to be a Blue Jays fan.
I will leave us with this thought. Baseball America today released their top 10 Blue Jays prospects, the kind of the end of the year one that they do. And along with that, they project the lineup in the future, and the Blue Jays rotation for 2029 was Trey Savage, Johnny King, Gage Stanifer, Ricky Tiedemann, and Jake Bloss. And now Dylan Cease is the top of that. So I think for an organization that has obviously put an emphasis on having some veteran arms, that's a nice veteran arm to kind of be able to lock yourself into the 2030s, which are approaching at a terrifying rate, I will say.
Things getting tasty in Blue Jays land.
You think I know I said I was going to leave us with that thought, but last one, you think that is the end of Scherzer and Bassett in Toronto?
I think at this point, probably creates a bit of a redundancy, and be interesting to see where they land. I don't think that a reunion would be the worst thing, but really kind of feels like more of a kind of a February than maybe a winter meetings thing.
Yeah, I think if they trade, if you are able to clear some salary with a Barrios trade, then maybe that kind of makes sense. And then, you kind of slot them into that spot, and then you kind of have that same conversation with all those guys behind them. But no questions at the top of the rotation anymore because Dylan Cease is there to solve that. You got any final thoughts before we run?
I'm just looking forward to seeing Dylan Cease in a Blue Jays jersey. Can't wait for this press conference.
It'll be good. It'll be good. I'm always love an opportunity to
Yeah.
hear
The
Ross
uh
talk.
the
So
joint Bo Tucker Cease
Bo Tucker
conference
Cease.
in in
That
early December will feed families.
they'll do like the Miami Heat
The
big
Heatles, not
three.
one, not two,
Yeah.
not three. Tetsuya
Uh,
Hamai will be at that. Ketel Marte will be at that.
the big seven. They're calling them. All right.
All right,
Well,
let's sign out
with
before I start adding Paul Skeens and Terry Skubal to this rotation.
that is going to do it for us here today at the Bird's Eye View podcast. Make sure to hit the subscribe and like buttons if you're watching on YouTube. If you're listening along on the audio provider of your choice, make sure to drop a follow and review. You can follow us all on Twitter. I am at Worden_Zach. Jory is at J Negin-Shecter, and the pod is at BEV_pod. Thanks so much for listening.